everyone, welcome back to season 2 of the Are We Nearly There Yet podcast. My name is Sonia and I do lots of different things. Well, one of those things that I do is that I am a mum. I'm a mum to 4 children and I'm really interested in exploring this journey I'm on and exploring with you the journey you're on. Collectively together we're on a journey, aren't we, as parents? And I'm going to be chatting to somebody different each week about a different aspect of family life. Why don't you come and join us in this conversation, this journey together? This week I'm happy to share with you a conversation I actually recorded back in the summer with my friend Becca Taylor. She brings so much wisdom and insight into not only who she is as a parent, but also flipping it and looking at it through the lens of what it's like to actually be a child, thinking about our children's emotional needs and how that reflects back in us as well. So come along and listen. Hey, so welcome Becca to the Are We Nearly There Yet podcast. How are you doing, Becca?
I am good. I was just saying I'm a little bit sad because I'm supposed to be in Spain right now and I'm not in sunny Spain. But apart from that, I'm good.
Instead of that, you're chatting to me, which is kind of not a very great runner-up. Yeah, maybe I should have made paella or something for us.
Yeah, all I need is a sangria in my hand and I'd be fine. Never mind.
Oh. Well, thank you for joining us on the podcast. It's great to have you with us. Some people like Kerith will know you. Obviously, some people that aren't part of Kerith will be listening to this as well. So people who don't know who you are, a little bit about yourself. And could you start off by telling us who is your family? Who's family to you? And by that, I mean your family now, and who were your family when you were growing up, Becca?
So I am married to Neil. He's my husband. We've been married for nearly 14 years. And then I've got 3 girls, Fern, Freya and Letty. So they're 7, 5 and 3. So that's who lives in my house at the moment. The girls are desperate for pets, but I am holding off on all pets. I'm trying to persuade them that's a bad idea. But I also am a teacher. So I teach Year 2 children 4 days a week. And I have a Sanity Friday, which is my day off. Yeah. And then when I was growing up, I grew up in a home. Actually, I'm one of 3 girls, so I'm the oldest sister, and I've got my mum and my dad at home. And actually I have grown up in a Christian family my whole life, so so ever since I was a baby I have been in church and part of what happens in church life, pretty full on from the start, really.
So one of 3 girls, and you then had 3 girls?
Yes.
That's like
yeah, Neil is.
Becky Oliver's the same, isn't she?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and Neil is one of 4 boys. So.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
It could have gone either way.
I know. Yeah, we were gobsmacked to end up with girls. To be honest, we really fully expected boys.
Yeah. Oh, and how did you guys meet?
We met at church youth group. Classic church youth group romance. So yeah, we got married young, so I was 19 and Neil was 21.
Oh, cool. That's cool. How long had you guys been together at that point?
4 years, I think. 3 or 4 years.
Oh, so you impressed each other with each other's Bible knowledge. and then fell in love. Fell in love for a study Bible, a youth Bible.
Yeah, well, maybe, yeah.
Oh, I love that. So yeah, you've mentioned a little bit about your work outside of the home. Tell us a little bit about that. How long have you been teaching?
So I've been a teacher for 10 years, but there have been gaps. So I taught for 5 years, I think it was, before I had Fern, my eldest. And then I went back and did a year. And then after maternity leave, I went back and did a year, and then I had Freya, who's my second. And then after Freya, I decided I just wanted a bit of a break. Going back to teaching after Fern had been hard work, really, and I just had found it a bit too much of a juggle. So I had a bit of a break. I became a childminder for a year, and then I had my 3rd baby, Letty. And then when she was just before she was 1, I started thinking about going back into childminding and what that might look like, and then found myself really teaching. So just without too much intention, a job had come up at the school that I'd used to work in, and I knew they were desperate for someone because it was nearly the end of the summer holidays. And so I I kind of thought, well, I don't really want to teach full time, but maybe they'd like someone just to come and do the mornings, and it might be a nice ease back into teaching. And so that's what I did. I worked mornings every day, every morning for that year, and really loved being back in the classroom. And so then my hours gradually increased. So this will be my sort of third year being a teacher and a mum of 3. And yeah, and so now I'm working as a year 2 teacher, and I also lead Key Stage 1, which is a role that I've never really particularly looked for, but I really actually enjoy having a little bit of leadership responsibility as well, just enough so that it's not high pressure, but there's something extra there.
Yeah. And how do you find the balance, doing that and being mum and wife and friend and daughter and everything else that you have in your life as well? That balance.
Well, so I use the words sanity Fridays. I would say my Fridays are really my sanity days. And actually, the week is really full. It's a really big juggle, as all working parents will know. There's lots to fit in. But that Friday, I make sure that I use it well most of the time. So what I tend to do on a Friday, and it has changed over the years as my children have grown up, but what I tend to do is I go to a Bible study group in the morning, on Friday morning, and then on Friday afternoon I get myself all set up ready for the week in terms of schoolwork and things that I need to achieve, so that I can then try and enjoy the weekends a bit. And then I do tend to use the odd swimming lesson or ballet lesson as a little bit of time. I do tend to go and sit on the side of the swimming pool with my laptop and do a bit of planning or a bit of sneaky something. Yeah, so it is a juggle, and I do have to really use my minutes wisely. But I think one of the things that I've just realised recently, I think actually, is that when I first had Fern, who's my eldest, I thought that to be a good mum I had to stay at home and I had to be with her all the time, and I had to do what I'd seen kind of modelled by my mum and my mother-in-law and other women who I really respected. And it just didn't fit me. It just wasn't the right thing for me, and I have had to go through a bit of a process thinking about, well, what does work for me and our family, and what model is the one that we want to use. And it doesn't necessarily have to look like one that anyone else has modeled to me before. Yeah
And sometimes it's like unlearning something that other people may not have intentionally put on us. Sometimes we've put those things on ourselves as well. But
when I talk to my mum, she always says that it was an absolute privilege and joy for her to be at home with me and my sisters, and she loved it. And I love spending time with my children, but actually I love being a teacher, and it really brings me life, and it makes me feel a bit more alive. And I think life is a little bit flatter when I'm not teaching. And so it's good for my girls to see me doing something that I love and that brings me life. And actually we have conversations where they say, so Freya, mummy, I want to be a teacher and a mummy and a waitress. And I just love that she has got the idea that she can do more than one thing, and she can gather roles that she wants to try and have a go at. And I want my girls to understand that there's not one right way of being a mummy, but there's lots of different ways. So,
for those women or men who feel really called to stay at home and not work outside of the home, then that's great. But for those that do feel called to a certain role, or in some cases it's just want to work because there might be financial reasons, but also because it brings them joy external to their kids, and that's fine and good as well. And that probably for people that feel that, if it's that kind of happy mum, happy baby kind of, but it's true, isn't it, that we're topped up, and for some working, that some people that might be exercising, some people, or it could be more that it's more than one thing often.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think I went into parenting thinking this is the way I will do it because this is what I believe is the right way, and there's nothing like a baby and a family to teach you that actually sometimes our right way doesn't always fit. Yeah, so I think there's many right ways to be a parent.
And sometimes there's more than one right way for us. I think I know between my children that after I had my eldest, I felt really passionate and called that I should be at home with him.
Yeah.
And then as I gradually added to our brood, it was
Not
just
so gradually.
maybe I kind of hit capacity on that and thought I need a bit of a break. I don't know what it was.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've changed along the way with that as well, and it's okay to give ourselves permission that we can do things differently to other people, but
Yeah.
differently to our own expectations or how we did things the previous year or the previous month even. Like,
Yes. Yeah.
it's okay. What specifically as a teacher, because obviously like teacher, you're caring and nurturing and helping young children to learn and develop. You're also doing that in the home as a mum. Do you find the overlap of those two specific roles easy? Not just the kind of juggling work and home, but specifically teaching?
I think that the two roles are quite different. So in school, by necessity, there have to be quite firm boundaries and there have to be quite specific ways of doing things, because otherwise there would be carnage in the classroom. So it just there are really firm boundaries. Actually, one of the things I've really loved about teaching during the lockdown period, so I just had a little pod of 11 children and I really loved being able to be a little bit more flexible, and if a child wanted to lie on the floor to do whatever they could without it meaning that they were a trip hazard to 29 other children. So I really loved that. But actually, generally as a teacher, you do have to be quite regimented is the wrong word, but there are really strict routines and there are boundaries and there are rules in place that are necessary to keep everybody safe and to be able to sort of maintain a good working environment. Whereas at home, I do tend to be quite a lot looser with that. And I think I'm quite keen not to timetable my children too much. Once they get home from school, they're at an age where all of them just love to play. Their best day ever would be to play dollies and then play something else and then play something else, and they just play. And I really do strongly believe that play is such a key factor to learning and growing and developing and just becoming a human being, becoming an adult, that actually play is really important. And I do really wish actually that our school system had more space for play as the children got older, but it doesn't really. And so I'm quite keen at home to just give my children a bit more freedom and a bit more play. And I would say there are some tricky things, like sometimes I find myself being like, oh, well, that's not how I would have done it in my classroom, thinking about how my children are at school. And sometimes you just have to bite your tongue, and sometimes you do have to fight a bit of a battle. And I guess a challenge for me is to not shy away from the school battles that I need to fight on my children's behalf. So if one of my children is finding something really difficult, it's actually, I kind of feel awkward going in because I worry about being perceived as the teacher mum who is going to come and tell us how to do our jobs and be really annoying. But actually, I guess one of the challenges is actually putting that aside and just being mum and advocating for my children without the teacher role.
You talk about the importance of play, and I think most of us would know that. Everyone talks about it. Why
is it important?
I mean, I think I know, but just share a bit more of that, will you, for our listeners?
So to be honest, I'm not going to talk very much about why it's important educationally, apart from it kind of is practice ground for real life. So a lot of children's play is practicing for real life. But actually, that aside, the educational bit aside from that is just really good for their well-being. It's just really good for children not to be structured and actually
have fun.
to have fun and to be little children. And it's really easy for our children to grow up very quickly with, access to the internet and access to a lot of screens, and actually a school system that does require quite difficult things from them quite early on. I am just really keen not to make my children grow up too quickly. I want them to enjoy their childhood. And there is a thing about kind of boredom and space and lack of timetabling leads to creativity and imagination. And I really do see that with my girls. I mean, they do tend to play the same sort of games over and over again, but the way they can just switch into a game and just be really fully there, loving their game, thinking of different ways to solve the problems and cooperating with each other, and then falling out and then finding a way around it, and all of that, they're the memories, they're the experiences I want them to, have as they grow up, those happy play days.
Yeah, and it's like topping up, we talk about like filling our buckets, but it's filling their buckets as well, as you say, their well-being, their emotional health, and then just, I think it's good preparation for adulthood. Not that I don't view childhood as purely preparation ground for adulthood. Like, children are, in their own right, fully human people, there's not
absolutely
just in a waiting room until they become adults, like, but for their lives to be rich and full of joyful experiences. But actually, as adults, I think for us to have that playful edge, and thus to retain those moments and have those kind of really like ingrained in our memory bank and in our formation of who we are, in our childhood development of what it means to just have fun and play and kick back and relax and not have all the pressures around us. Like, let's give, as you say, let's give our children as many of those moments as we can, because they are it seems they're having to be more grown up much more quicker than ever, and such an overstimulated generation, isn't it, in terms of what's available. Like, when my children tell me they're bored, I say good, because that's when you can go and be imaginative and create. And
absolutely.
I bored as a child, I didn't have a screen put in front of me straight away, because they didn't exist in that way when I was younger. So I sound like an old lady now.
No, and I am holding off tablets and things as long as I possibly can, because there's so much richness to be had in, just imagination and all of that.
Yeah, it's good. So just quickly before we move on to a bit more of that emotionally healthy stuff, I can't think of the word it is. I'm interested just to know, like, just before we move on from the teacher part, so when we were in lockdown and you were having to do home learning with your children, or did your children go in as they were key worker children?
No, I was having to homeschool.
So tell me about that, because there's a perception, I think, among the non-teacher parents. We all think, for teachers, it must have been a doddle. Was it a doddle to have to?
No, it was so hard.
Good.
I think so. One of the things that the school that I work at did was we called the children in our class every week, and just so obviously, because I teach younger children, the parents would pick up, and I'd just do a little check-in with them, and there'd be so many like, I'm really struggling to get them to do this, that, or the other. And one of the things that was lovely for me was to be able to just go, yes, me too. And there was a bit of almost like therapy between us, really, parent to teacher, but parent to parent, sort of, yes, this is just really hard. And it's really hard. It's far easier to get a class full of 7-year-olds to follow my instructions than it is to get my own 3 children to follow them. And actually, to be honest, I wouldn't want it to be any other way. I want to be first and foremost mum, and I want to be first and foremost our home to first and foremost be a place to relax and to just kick back a bit, like we've spoken about. So lockdown was tricky. I am by nature a real creature of habit and of routine, and so actually that was quite helpful, because we did quite quickly fall into a really good routine, and I would say the routine really helped us. I had a lot of mum guilt, I would say, about not being able to complete all of the work set by my girls' school, And to be honest, I do not know how the teachers there managed it, because they set some amazing things. They really did an amazing job of the setting academic work that was really high quality. But we just couldn't do it all. I've got Letty in nursery, Freya in year 1, Fern in year 2. We just couldn't fit a day's worth of schooling for 3 different age groups into one day, plus my other work commitments. It couldn't be done.
No.
And so I did have to give myself a little bit of a talking to quite early on, just saying, just calm down. It's okay. You're not able to do everything, and that is okay. Choose the things that are important, do those things, give yourself a bit of a break. That was kind of, be kind to yourself, was the talking to I had to give to myself, really.
And that's good for us to hear, those of us who are not, because who are not trained teachers. I'm a half trained teacher. I gave up after a while. But, for those of us who are not professionals in the education system, it's good for us to hear that, if those of you that were finding it, challenging with your own children, then actually we can be kind to ourselves as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It was just a really difficult time for everyone, and different people managed it differently. It just was what it was, is what it is.
Yeah. So I'm really interested to talk a bit more with you about, I know I've noticed we're friends on Facebook, and some of the things you share, just really hit with me in terms of kind of just your philosophy and how you wanted to raise your girls, particularly in terms of their emotional health, fills their emotional cup, what doesn't fill a child's emotional cup, what empties it, and kind of conflict resolution, different things like that. Talk about your heart behind, there's quite a lot there, so we could talk for a whole week's worth, but where did you land particularly with that stuff? Where does that come from? Where's that passion?
So I think something that I have seen that perhaps once was a tendency of my own that I have wanted to change, really, is this idea that the adult in the relationship has the teaching role and the child in the relationship has the learning role. Mm-hmm. And I think if we kind of start there, actually, I don't really think that that's true. Mm-hmm. I think that actually how I want to be as a parent is that I give to my children and they give to me, and I teach my children and they teach me. And of course there will be some obvious things, like I will need to teach my 2-year-old to use the toilet, or I will need to teach my children how to cross the road safely. There are things there that I need to teach, and there are boundaries there that I need to put in place. But something that really jars and really grates with me is the kind of power dynamic where the parent holds all the power and the children kind of just have to go along with that. That feels uncomfortable to me. And so I guess starting there, I just really want my home to be a place where my girls are valued just for who they are and for what they bring to our family now. A little bit like you were saying, Sonia, not waiting for them to be grown-ups and suddenly, be valuable. I want to value them for who they are now and understand that they are their own unique, brilliant little personalities.
Yeah.
And so that's probably my kind of starting point, just giving them value and giving them a voice and letting them be themselves. And I guess it sounds really obvious, but it's really easy actually to slip into patterns of behaviour that don't value them. Yeah. So just a really easy example, an example from today. So we were at the park. I gave Freya a time trial challenge. How quickly could she do some things at the park? And then Fern wanted a time trial challenge, but there were lots of other people using the equipment and it wasn't really appropriate. And she was just really sad. And she is quite led by her emotions. And so she was really crying, really upset. My kind of knee-jerk reaction is like, oh, for goodness sake, it's no big deal. We'll do a time trial another day. It's fine. Just be fine. And that's just so unhelpful for her, because actually she really feels things quite deeply, and she was really sad, and it was a sadness for her. And actually, I want to acknowledge that. I want to acknowledge that yeah, that's sad for you, and it's perhaps not a convenient reaction for me, and it's not, makes my life a bit more difficult because now you're wailing in the park and I have to, do something. But actually, that's okay. That's you, and you're allowed to express your emotions, and you're allowed to feel sadness, and you're allowed to feel disappointment, and you're allowed to do it differently from me, because we are different. And so, yeah, I quite often have to almost regulate myself when my children react to things in ways that I find difficult, because they are valuable, and their reactions to things are valuable, and the fact that they're different to the way I would react is good, because they're not me.
Yeah.
And so I think that's how I want to be as a parent. I want them to know that they are allowed to do things their way. And of course, wailing in the middle of the park is perhaps not the most appropriate response. So there has to be a bit of coaching, but what I don't want to do is just squash things down. And I know that perhaps I've had a tendency to squash emotions and just be like, I'm fine, moving on. But that's not actually that healthy. And so I'm really passionate about finding ways to help my children develop in a way that is emotionally healthy, and to understand that their emotions are valued, even if they're perceived to be bad emotions. Those emotions even are also valued. Yeah.
I guess it's walking a line between kind of wanting to help and I like that word coaching that you use, like coach our children in terms of regulating feelings and emotions, and not suppressing or denying, or it's like wanting to validate their emotions.
Yes.
I always think we as in adults generally, we expect things of children that we don't expect of adults in terms of emotions. For example, when a toddler is having a complete emotional meltdown, a tantrum, or a baby is crying, there's often a lot out there to, let them cry it out, leave them to cry, just ignore, and I'm like, I've had moments in my life where I've sat and cried, or even like sobbed about something that's going on in my life. And if my husband just left me and ignored me and come to see how I was and listen to me, and that would just be so cruel, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
If my husband or my friend or anyone in the room with me just ignored me, but there's often that kind of, or if he said, "Oh, just don't be silly, snap out,"
Stop crying.
but we seem to expect that that's okay with children, and it really, it gets to me as well. But then also, Becca, I find I'm passionate about this as well, and I really feel this, but also it's so easy for us as parents to slip into habits of, maybe it's the way we were parented. As much as our parents were probably great parents and everything, maybe it's just habits or phrases that you learn and pick up from our parents or people around us, the media, and I find myself saying things it's completely against everything with you today. So how do you self-regulate yourself in that?
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? It's really hard. So
you hear yourself saying something and you think, goodness, that's completely at odds, and I'm sitting here having this conversation, it ticks all my boxes, and I'm like, really passionate about it, and I know, Becca, that I haven't been the mum that I'm talking about, that I want to be about, like, even today.
Absolutely the same.
So
the words have left my mouth, like, why can't you just stop crying? Absolutely. I think we get triggered, don't we? There are things that kind of just flip the switch for us, and we just need and so there are some things that I do that are good, and there are some things that I do that are perhaps not so good. One thing I do when I'm struggling is a deep breath. I know that's ridiculous, but sometimes just to breathe in, breathe out.
Yeah, it's not at all ridiculous.
Okay, here we go. One thing I read actually in a book, a teaching book about behaviour management, and the author was talking about a teacher who worked in a in a unit for children with particularly challenging and demanding behaviour, and he said this guy had a strategy where if something was really like kind of getting to him, he would almost zone out. And when he asked this teacher about what he was doing, this teacher was effectively going to his happy place. Like he was imagining himself in a place where he was calm. And I can't even remember what his example was. But my example, there is a beach by where my grandma and granddad live, which is just my absolute most favourite place in the world. And actually, when things are really bad in my house and I'm just, you know, when they're all screaming or there's something has really kicked off, I sometimes, when I remember, just take a moment to imagine myself on this beach.
Yeah.
Just imagine myself there for a minute. Imagine the waves, imagine the smell, imagine the sounds. And then for some reason, it's just a little bit easier to be calm. I don't know why, but that tends to work for me. Another thing that I do, if I'm really kind of, I know I'm going to lose it in a minute, is I say to them, I feel like I'm going to lose my temper. I'm just going to walk away for a minute and I'll be back in a moment. And again, just removing myself from the situation. I don't know whether that's good for them or not, but it is necessary. I figure it's better than me really losing my temper with them. So that, you know, there are little things to do. And there's a book that I've read by an author called Janet Lansbury, and she uses this phrase unruffled, and I just love that idea. And the kind of idea of it is that as a parent, you can throw whatever you need at me. My child can throw all their anger, all their disappointment, all their heartbreak, all their boundary testing at me, and I'm not ruffled by it. I am, you know, I'm enough to kind of carry that, and they don't need to deal with the overwhelm of those feelings because I can carry the overwhelm of those feelings. And I love that idea of unruffled, and I guess it just, as I say it, paints a picture of our relationship with God, doesn't it? Like I can throw all my overwhelm at God, knowing that he is beyond big enough to hold it all. And I guess the beauty is in a situation where you have got a relationship with God, in those awful parenting moments where you just feel like I'm kind of at the edge, or I'm not able to deal with my children's emotions in the way that I want to. I guess we can just take it to God and almost do those emergency prayers, which I also have done, like the just help me right now before something bad happens. Like we can do that. And I think that is so helpful. But I love that unruffled idea, maybe because it paints a picture of our relationship with God and how he is a really good parent to us, and he can hold everything that we can throw at him. And I want that to be the experience that my children have, and it won't be perfect. And I think a parent apologizing for imperfection is really powerful, but I want the general feeling to be that actually their emotions are safe with me, and safe with Neil as well.
We often have a conversation of, I think sometimes James has thought I'm a bit funny in saying, you know, when I'm talking about certain things and I say, you know, I want to lay the foundations now, but when they are older, now it might be over. I'm kind of getting a little bit older now, but it might be over a piece of Lego, or, you know, something that we trivial, but in a few years' time, it will become more serious. Now a piece of Lego argument is serious. Not diminishing that, but you know what we view to be more serious. And actually, I want to lay those foundations now. And in the moment, I'm like, well, I want you to tell me now, or want to have the conversations now, so that when they're older, it's laying that foundation.
Yeah. And actually, that's made me think. I love that idea. So there's a thing I kind of try and keep in mind is like I'm playing the long game with my parenting. I'm not going for short-term compliance. And so there are some things I did in my parenting with Fern that I've actually kind of discontinued because I've decided that the result of those is short-term compliance, and I don't want to go for short-term compliance. I want to go for long-term kind of moral compass and relationship with God, and long term in a voice that brings value and that is best for my children as well. I don't want to just kind of use the strategies that will make my life easiest right now. I want to play the long game. So yeah, I love that idea, the laying the foundations now.
Yeah,
Exactly
building blocks. And yeah, we've often had conversations, because I know that in our marriage, I'm the one that's kind of, hey, let's dreaming big, and let's sell a house and move to the other side of the world. And like, James is like, okay, what are we having for tea in 5 minutes? Shall I start tea? And so like, and that kind of is mirrored in that whole kind of like, I'm like, but if they feel they can't talk to us about this now, then in 10 years time, when it's someone at school and it, you know, and he's like, but we've come to a kind of halfway point with it where we're both, we're working trying to work together on that, because it's really, I think, to just allow those moments and allow, that's all really.
And I love that idea about wanting them to be able to talk now as well. I think there was a thing that happened in our house a little while ago that I was so delighted about, and I know, or I think anyway, that there would be a number of people who would be horrified. And what happened was, one night, I think it was just as we were getting ready for bed or something, Fern was like, Mummy, do you think God really exists? And I said, well, what do you think about it? And she was like, well, I'm not sure, because and then she had this whole rationale, like, because sometimes this happens, but so and so at school says this, and so I just don't really know. And obviously I believe in God and I have a relationship with God, and that's what I desperately want for my children and pray for my children. But at the same time, the fact that she just came out with that question, I was like, yes, this is the culture I want in my house, where
Absolutely.
you can say any question and it doesn't frighten me and it's not out of bounds. You ask all the questions here. I don't want you to take them anywhere else. Bring them here. And so I was delighted with that. And I love what you're saying, really. It's the same thing, isn't it? That we want them to be able to talk about it here.
Yeah. And actually, if anyone is horrified by that, then we want our children's faith to be their own faith, not our faith. So the fact that she's questioning for herself, I think that's really good, because we pray that she'll come to the conclusion that he is real and that she chooses him for herself. You know, if she hasn't been through that process, then it might be that it's not her own choice and she's just living through something that she thinks will please you, whereas we want it to be her choice and her personal relationship. I think questioning faith for children is a really important part of their development and process and learning and taking that on for themselves. So I'm all for it. We just obviously come through the other side.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we can pray and God does the rest. So that's, our children are his. We're kind of stewards of them, which sometimes are toughy, but yeah. Well, we're coming to the end of our time together, Becca, but thank you so much for joining us this week. I want to do one thing before you go. The question that I ask everyone at the end, are we nearly there yet, is a phrase that probably in the stage of you're in parenting, probably if you've gone a long journey, you hear that from Letty. Mom, are we nearly there yet? But we're the ones on the journey. We've talked about that a bit already, how we might change our opinions and our actions along the journey of parenting, might change how we do things along the way. But thinking about journey, you should be in Spain right now. You'd have packed a case full of stuff for your holiday. This journey of parenting, what essential items would you take with you? Would you have taken with you, packed with you at the start of this journey? Had you known then what you know now?
Yeah, so I've had a little think about this, and there's just a few things. So the first thing, I think, good friends. And I would say there are a few just real gems of friends. I have a few real treasures who have walked with me for a lot of parenting, but perhaps not from the very beginning. And so I would have packed them in my suitcase straight away. Just, their encouragement and wisdom and laughter and all of that, I would have packed them. I also would have packed a message to myself, probably just saying, like, just lighten up a little bit. It's okay. Like, don't take yourself quite so seriously. Don't take the journey so seriously all the time. Yeah, it's okay if it goes wrong a little bit, just pick yourself up and try again. And yeah, so I would have probably just told myself to and have a bit more fun. Yeah, and I think you mentioned a little while ago about your kind of the dynamic between you and James and your parenting. And actually, one of the things that I really love about Neil's parenting is he just brings the fun side, and I can be the serious one, but he definitely brings a fair bit of fun and laughter. And so I think I would have told myself that the fun is just as needed and just as good and just as important as the serious stuff.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
I hope you have a great rest of the week and catch up soon. Thank you, Becca.
Yeah, thank you, Sonia.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much to Becca for joining me in that conversation, and thank you for listening along as well. As Becca said, it's so important to have a community around us. Perhaps you're looking for community. If you are, you can find out about our small groups at Kerith Church if you go to our website, which is kerith.church. Also, if you've enjoyed this week's conversation or any of the previous ones we've had, why don't you like and subscribe this podcast? It would be great to get the message out there. More people will be aware of it, more people will see it if you're able to do that. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Are We Nearly There Yet?